Good evening. It is 5:20 and we are going to call this meeting to order. Before we jump into, I lied, I'm going to jump into item A, which is to discuss and take appropriate action on appointment to fill the trustee vacancy in single member District 3. I do just want to outline the process for the trustees and the candidates that are here. So what we are going to do is draw for lots in this basket up here. One at a time, we'll call each of y'all up. It has a number on it. That's going to be the corresponding number spot that you'll be interviewing in. For the trustees, we each have been given a packet up here. It has the information that the candidates submitted as part of their application process, as well as a note sheet should you need it. Once we pull lots, we're going to ask the two candidates that are not interviewing to be escorted by Ms. Carrasco. If you can raise your hand, Ms. Carrasco. She will escort y'all to the back room while we interview one candidate at a time. Trustees, you submitted your questions in advance. The papers are in front of us as well. Each trustee will choose one question to ask the candidates, and that will be the question that's used the entire night. So you can't switch them back and forth between your question types. We're good on that, trustees? Yep. Okay, so candidates, once the interview starts, you'll be given 90 seconds for your opening statement. After that, we will jump in, we'll snake it, so we'll start with Trustee Hinani or Trustee Cuellar and go back and forth. We'll each go through our questions. You'll have 90 seconds to respond as well. I'll be the timekeeper. I'll let you finish your statement if it runs over time, but at some point, we're gonna cut you off and say, let's move on. From that, once you complete, we'll ask you to then go back to the room with Ms. Carrasco, ask the other candidate to go out. Once we finish that 3 times, we will deliberate if there's any deliberation for this board while y'all are still in the back room. Once the trustees are ready to make a decision, we'll invite you back out and trustees will take a roll call vote. What that means is you will say your name and the candidate that you are selecting, correct? So I, Israel Irabali, would pick Israel Irabali as a good example to fill, that's good. All right, any questions?
I just need a clarification.
Yes, ma'am.
So we're going to deliberate here on the dais?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Everything will be in open session.
Thank you.
The intent is to take action today, but trustees, there are several options as we go through this process if you so choose. Ms. Collins is well versed in all of them, as she told me yesterday. So we will go ahead and start in the order that I have everything. So Mr. Loveridge, if you want to come and select your lot, that'll be followed by Mr. Vargas and then Mr. Wagner. Yeah, rip on in. Who has the 1? All right, 2, 3. All right, so Ms. Carrasco, can you please escort numbers 2 and 3? For the candidates, we just ask that you respect the process. Obviously, candidate 1 is at a disadvantage here, seeing as it's streamed publicly and open. We ask that you respect that, follow that spirit, and not watch on your phones or in any other monitors in the district's office. What? You'd like to, yes, you can join us right here at the middle. Right here? Yeah, it's a hot seat. Yes. So I'm just pulling up the timer. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and jump into the opening statement. If you just want to introduce yourself, and I'll leave it to you. Just share why you would like to be trustee for District 3.
Good afternoon, colleagues. It's my pleasure to be here with you. I'm Dr. Aaron Wagner, and I'm a career educator. At the forum last week, I spoke a lot about the concerns that school boards face, charter schools, demographic shifts in our city, the movement of individuals east, right, the population center moving east. I talked about how we have issues around literacy. As a classroom teacher here and a university instructor here in our region, I see young people come to class unable to read well. I also see that we have a crisis of public faith in our institutions. Not just EPISD, but many of our institutions, right? And so what I bring to the board is a perspective as an educator. I worked in a variety of settings, middle school, high school, university. I've worked in South Korea, in Mexico. I was a fellow at the European University of Viadrina, and I've taught as an adjunct instructor at UTEP and EPCC. I'm currently teaching at the Valle Verde Early College High School for Isleta. I was also a college and career readiness advisor here at Jeff Silva. In addition to the understanding of what's going on in our schools, which I think is a really valuable perspective for the board, I think that my experience with a variety of settings helps me understand what works and what doesn't work. The fact that I have worked as an administrator at the graduate school at UTEP and having worked as a sort of pseudo-administrative role as a college and career readiness advisor, I have a good understanding of career pathways as well as the metrics. As you guys are
Dr.
aware.
Wagner. Sorry, your 90 seconds are up. I apologize. So we're going to go ahead and begin with Trustee Hanani, if you want to jump into your first question, And just to reiterate, you'll have 90 seconds to respond to the question. Trustee Hanani?
Okay, so my question is, given the reliance on high stakes testing in Texas specifically, how would you, as a member of the school board, propose to balance these assessments with comprehensive systems of accountability? Specifically, how would you address the concerns that such testing may not fully capture a student's abilities or contribute to equitable education outcomes?
Okay, so what I heard there, Ms. Hanani, is that you want to know how I can think about accountability in terms of the stakes, as well as how we can provide varied forms of assessment. So the first thing I want to note, and what I was about to say a second ago, is that 40% of a high school scorecard is now college and career readiness. There's a complex set of metrics that go into that, but those outcomes can vary a lot. That includes dual credit success, advanced placement. It includes industry certifications, enrolling immediately in a post-secondary institution. It includes enlisting in the military. And so there's a lot of outcomes there, and I'm familiar with a lot of these different pathways. In terms of a variety of ways that we can evaluate, I'm a big fan of project-based learning. And so if classroom teachers are trained and empowered to get the students doing cool things, science experiments, real problem solving in a variety of classrooms, we can use the products as formative assessments. And so that can give us a sense of the real work that's happening. I also think it helps us spark the joy that I was talking about at the session last week. A lot of our students, they're a little demoralized, right? I've seen at some of our schools a kind of remediation trap. We start remediating, we're talking about remediation, it's remediation, remediation. And I think, I believe that Ms. Saavedra, when she was first hired, talked about that first year instruction being a focus. I really think that getting back to that is important, but there are ways to incorporate assessment strategies with that. So,
Thank you. Your 90 seconds are up. Trustee Call?
Hi. If appointed as a trustee, and you were faced with a situation where you had to make a choice where one option was the best thing for the kids and the other option was the best thing for the employees of EPISD, which would you choose and why?
Thank you for that question. It's a difficult one. The answer is always the kids. But I think there is an asterisk there, though, because we want to make sure that for our kids to be successful, we also have to treat our employees with dignity and have fantastic talent. I talked about in the previous, the forum, I talked about how we want to have parity with our hiring practices and our compensation plans whenever possible. And I think that we can also do a better job of encouraging our campus leaders to make scheduling decisions that are setting our teachers up for success. But I think that all of our decisions have to be driven first and foremost by our students and their interests. I think after that, Our second obligation is to our employees, and our overwhelming obligation is to the taxpayer and to making sure that we're meeting our goals and our critical mission to provide excellent education opportunities as a public institution. But I think that if you follow what it is the students need, I think that the rest kind of falls into place, because I don't always think that, I think that when we make decisions that maybe don't respect the teachers, I think that sometimes those are made in a broader context where we're not really focusing on what the students really, really need. In the interest of fiscal responsibility, I think that having a classroom perspective up here helps the board make decisions about what is actually financially responsible.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. Trustee Beals?
Okay, hi. What do you see as the role of technology in education?
I think technology is secondary. I'm not saying that's not important. I think it is important. Having functioning projectors and computers makes or breaks classrooms. I saw on an APISD campus when a third of the students don't have functioning laptops with them, what a mess testing becomes, how difficult doing a variety of classroom activities is. And so this sort of base functionality of tech is super important. But I think that we get seduced by the promise of technology. And teachers, frankly, when you say to them, we've got this new tech, they respond by rolling their eyes, because they've seen so many examples of this new fantastic technology that's going to change everything. And then it gets purchased, it doesn't get used effectively, people don't get trained on it effectively, and it ends up, being one more thing in a litany of waste. That's exactly what I mean. Technology can be fantastic, but really it's the people. You have to have excellent, talented educators that you treat like professionals and you empower to do cool stuff, and then you give them the technology that they need, right? So the tech also, the desire for technology needs to be more bottom up in the ways that it's implemented.
Thank you. Trustee Hernandez?
When appointed, what will you do to cultivate an effective team of 8?
So I feel very strongly about the power of civility. And so I'm the kind of person that you can expect to advocate passionately, using data, using best practices, and using my gut and intuition and my understanding of what's happening in the situation. But I also understand that in order to work as a team, once decisions have been made, we have to all work together to push for success around that decision. And so I have been on several boards. I have served on multiple large committees. And I encourage you guys, if you haven't, to call people up and ask how I served on those boards. I served on the board of a nonprofit that had a lot of problems, and we made difficult decisions, didn't always agree, but made difficult decisions as a team. When I was a staff person at UTEP, I served on several large institution-level committees, including the EDGE Strategic Plan Committee and the President's Advisory Committee on Inclusion and Diversity. And in both of those committees, we dealt with difficult things, and I didn't always get my way. But I advocated passionately. I contributed to the work, and I contributed to the collective decision-making. And I think that's at the core, right, of having an effective team.
Thank you.
Trustee Coyer?
Thank you. All right, let's see. Good afternoon, Dr. Wagner.
Thank you, sir.
All right, let's see. What do you consider to be your area of greatest growth as a board member, and how will you plan to grow as a person, board member, and team member?
Okay. So I think that my area of greatest growth, this would obviously be a new kind of challenge for me. This is a huge institution. and a hugely important institution. And so while I have served on large committees, I have served at institutional level committees at, at a place like UTAP, I've worked in the nonprofit space, this is a scale that I recognize is different in terms of my role, and I take that seriously. And so as a lifelong learner and somebody who loves learning in general, I recently completed a graduate certificate in educational leadership. Having already gotten a PhD in the humanities and having already done enough school for anybody, frankly, I went back and I did that additional training so that I would have a better understanding of how it is that schools operate, how it is that governance and the legal components work, how we can do a better job of being good financial stewards. And so I just did graduate work on that last year. And so I've been thinking about it. And so this would be an opportunity for me to apply some of that knowledge and skill that I've been working on developing. And so I recognize that that's a new thing, but a challenge that I would eagerly embrace.
Great, thank you.
And the final question would be, in your opinion, what role do trustees play in the day-to-day operations of the school district?
So I think day to day, you have to be a cheerleader for the district and its success and its students and its teachers. That's, I think, the day to day, right? But I think with the meetings and with the governance requirements, the deeper piece is accountability. And so I think that, I was listening to y'all's discussion with the audit committee, and I was already fascinated and had 1,000 questions. And so I recognize that the day-to-day is not necessarily just that, but I would be thrilled to communicate the great things that are happening in APISD, but also be really frank with my colleagues about what I think we could do better. And I would also add that I have lived in my area of town for quite a while, since 2015. I lived in Ciudad Juarez before that, between 2010 and 2015. And so I'm familiar with the border context more broadly. I'm familiar with this community more broadly, having done quite a bit of applied research. And so another thing that I look forward to doing is getting out there and talking to people and listening well, getting a sense of how people are doing and what we can do to build that public trust.
Thank you very much. If you would like to go with Ms. Carrasco, and then Ms. Carrasco, if you can bring in. We appreciate your time, Dr. Wagner.
Thank you for your
Thank you for your-
consideration.
Yeah, yes, please. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Loveridge. As a reminder, it's going to be a 90-second introduction. From there, we're going to start with Trustee Cuellar this time. Each trustee gets a question. You'll be given 90 seconds for a response. And I'll let you finish your sentence, but I will have to cut you off at some point.
Thank you.
So if you would like to begin, introduce yourself.
My name is Jack Loveridge. I am an El Paso and a lifelong El Pasoan in my heart. I grew up here and went to Burgess High School, graduating in 2003. My mom's family came from Mexico. They grew up on the south side, just across the street from Sacred Heart Church on Oregon Street. Her parents came from Guanajuato and from Chihuahua, and they lived in a two-room apartment there in Presidio across the street from Sacred Heart. My dad's family came from Ohio, and he grew up in the northeast of El Paso. He's been here for 60 years, and he ended up teaching, well, actually, he was a paraprofessional at Austin High School for 13 years, working with in the special education department there. He was also at McGoffin. So the EPISD is really what gave me my start. As a student at Burgess, it set me on the course toward a great college education. It means a lot to me. It's meant a lot to my family. I've had relatives on both sides of my family who have either taught or been in various roles through the EPISD, nobody presently. But it just means so much to me. And so coming back to El Paso, I believe that this is where the economic foundation of the city lies, in the EPISD and what we are able to accomplish through it for the students of the district. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Cuellar? And before I forget, trustees, as a reminder, the question that we used for the last time is the same question we used this time.
Dr. Leverage, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Okay, the question I have for you is, what do you consider to be your area of greatest growth as a board member, and how will you plan to grow as a person, board member, and team member?
Thank you very much for the question. I think the greatest area of growth, personally, would be to think about the board as a whole entity. None of the individuals on the board are powerful independently. They only function together as a group. And so I think consistently throughout my career, throughout my life, I found that working together with people and not prejudging how they think or how they're going to respond to certain questions or how they're going to respond to certain problems is something that I'm very proud of, but I think it could be polished even further, especially given the challenges facing all school districts, all school boards across the state of Texas. So I think finding areas of compromise, learning to work together, I think that's something that we can all work toward. I think me in particular, I would really love to be able to just have great conversations with each individual on this board, to consider each one of you friends of mine, and to be able to work together for the good of the district. I also think that we as a board, if I were to be appointed to the board, have the great challenge of communication, of being able to connect directly with the public. And I think that's something that I would like to perfect personally. I think that's something that I could contribute to as well. So thank you.
Trustee Hernandez?
When appointed, what will you do to cultivate an effective team of 8?
Could you repeat the question? I couldn't hear the last part. I'm sorry.
Yes, sir. When appointed, what will you do to cultivate an effective team of 8?
I think that, thank you for the question. I think that creating an effective team is, again, about seeing eye to eye with people and assuming that they have the best interests of the district in mind, that they are people of good faith, as I said during the meeting at Austin High School, that they are all in it for the betterment of the city and of the students of the district. I think that's something that is very clear on this particular board, having watched a lot of your meetings, having spoken with a few of you informally. I can feel the enthusiasm for the city and for education generally. And that's what excites me, that this is something of a new generation of El Pasoans who are looking to the past for guidance, but are not afraid to go into the future with a new mission. And so I think that mission is what makes a great team. And I think that mission is what can be contagious in a sense. It can be something that can be spread to the rest of the district as a whole. And I think that could start here. So I appreciate the question. Thank you.
Trustee Beals?
Yes. Hi.
Hello.
What do you see as the role of technology in education?
That's another really good question. So as the founder of a really very small startup here in El Paso that's working with artificial intelligence, I think the role of technology in education is something that we need to discuss openly. We need to be careful with applying technology to every single problem that gets thrown at us. But what we need to do is make sure that our students are as literate as possible in upcoming technologies, that they are conversant with how to use artificial intelligence within particular guardrails. So I think that's something that needs to be an ongoing discussion, and I would definitely be keen to involve the various technology-focused programs here in the PISD that are already underway. I would love to engage UTEP and NMSU as well to get those conversations going. But what we've seen during the pandemic, how technology enabled education to continue going, for better or for worse in many cases. I think that there are some essential tools and then there are experimental tools. And when it comes to those experimental tools, we do need to have guardrails and to be able to discuss the various limitations of them candidly, openly. And I think that's something that I could contribute to as well, a degree of skepticism.
Trustee Call?
If appointed as a trustee and you were faced with a situation where you were forced to choose between one option that was the best thing for the kids and one option that the other option was the best thing for our employees, which would you choose and why?
I think that the priority always needs to be the kids. It's very obvious to me, and I know that's something that is a choice that no board wants to have to make. But that's the purpose of public education. That's the purpose of public institutions like the PISD, to serve the students themselves first and foremost, and then secondarily to serve the entire community. And so looking at big picture problems, thinking of how the various public institutions of the city relate to one another, I think that that's a way to avoid having to make decisions like that too often. But when it comes down to it, you must prioritize the students, but you also have to be sure that the teachers themselves, the staff, are as best supported as they can to independently teach, to independently provide an educational experience that's second to none in this community. So, we don't want to get there, but when it comes down to it, that's the priority of a district like this.
Thank you.
Trustee Anani?
Hi. Given the reliance on high-stakes testing in Texas specifically, how would you, as a member of the school board, propose to balance these assessments with comprehensive systems of accountability? Specifically, how would you address the concerns that such testing may not fully capture students' abilities or contribute to equitable education outcomes?
That's a very good question, and I think back to previous experience I've had in the policy world, in the digital sector, yes, but also in K through 12 education between 2009 and 2011. The commentaries that we were writing at the nonprofit that I was working at focused particularly on No Child Left Behind's potential reauthorization under the Obama administration. I think we have to have a broader approach to thinking about how students are assessed. I think there has to be a multidimensional approach that looks at all of the factors that are put into a child's education. And I think that it's essential to give the teachers the credit of being the best to judge the progress of a particular student. That said, we do work within the limitations of the particular state. So the state of Texas has, of course, a STAR exam. That's something that we need to be sure that we are hitting the mark on, and the levers that this district has set out, the strategic levers, I believe are putting us on a good footing through the EPISD to get to those destinations. But we need to really, as much as possible, get multiple measures of how a student is performing, to establish, to look at how a student's performing in relation to national benchmarks in particular. So I appreciate the question.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And to wrap it up, in your opinion, what role do trustees play in the day-to-day operations of the school district?
The day-to-day operations of a school district need to be minimal by the mandate of the state of Texas. That's how a school board operates in Texas. So the involvement of the board itself in day-to-day operations needs to be at the level of appointing and supervising a superintendent, supporting that superintendent, understanding what resources the district is going to have for coming years. And again, when it comes to the budget, this district is doing very well currently, and I want to see that continue. But I think that we need to operate within the confines mandated by the state of Texas. So the board sets the mission, sets the high-level priorities of the district, and it's up to us as a board, if I were to be appointed to this board, to provide the supports necessary to the administration to follow through to get us to that destination as a district. It's not a, so it's a supportive role, but of course it is a role of oversight. And that's what it essentially boils down to, the high-level decisions and being the voice of the community within the district itself.
Thank you, Dr. Loveridge. If you would like to go with Ms. Carrasco, and Ms. Carrasco, if you would like to bring the last candidate out. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Mr. Vargas, for joining us. We're going to go ahead and start with the 90-second opening statement. From there, we will begin with Trustee Hanani. She will ask a question. You'll have 90 seconds to respond, and it will go down the line. And so if you'd like to go ahead and start the opening statement.
All right, thank you. First of all, thank you for having me. As many of you know, I ran for this same position about 5 years ago in 2019 and lost in a runoff election by 4 votes. I'm not doing this into any sort of redemption tour or anything like that, but I'm still dedicated to the work that the school board does and think that I would be a boon to it. But I say that only that I believe I'm the only candidate for this appointment that does have, for lack of a better word, a mandate from the community. Like I said, losing by 4 votes means I garnered several hundred votes from the community. I block walked for several weeks, and so members of the community got to know me. I got to know the needs and wants of the community, and like I said, received a quasi point from them or quasi mandate from them. Other than that, I'd like to also point out that the impetus for me doing this was solely out of an obligation to my community, moving back to El Paso, trying to represent the needs and wants of the community as well as the schools, as well as my family who are educators, many of them, and I know what the needs and wants of teachers are. I believe I know what the needs and wants are of the community, specifically children from underserved areas. As you know, I'm the chief of the juvenile unit for the Public Defender's Office, which means that I see what are deemed the problem kids in our schools and know that schools are not a panacea. They're not there to solve everybody's problems, but I think we can do a better job of maybe alleviating the school to prison pipeline and maybe providing a safety net when the community falls short. When parents fall short, the community needs to step in and schools need to step in. And I do provide a unique perspective. For instance, just today I met with the chief of the juvenile probation office.
Thank you, Mr. Vargas. Your 90 seconds are up.
Thank you.
Trustee Hanani.
Given the reliance on high-stakes testing in Texas specifically, how would you, as a member of the school board, propose to balance these assessments with comprehensive systems of accountability? Specifically, how would you address the concerns that such testing may not fully capture a student's abilities or contribute to equitable education outcomes?
That's a good question. I think there's a big problem with high stakes testing. I think it makes, it gives teachers less wiggle room. I know teachers complain about not being able to teach to the student, but they teach to the test. And I believe that there's wiggle room with everything. In my experience with the law is that you look at a rule and you see where you can work around it in order to create positive change. And I can't answer that specifically more than I have with that regard, but you look at it and you talk to teachers and you understand what the problems are, what the pitfalls, and what the problems are maybe for students that aren't performing well on those tests, and that the teachers and the lesson plans get caught up in that. So it's a balancing act. It's going to be how can we meet these standards and these conditions set forth by Texas law, and balance that with what teachers are saying they really need, and the resources and the wiggle room and the freedom to sort of deviate from that as much as possible in order to teach the children. Like many of people here, I grew up not having to do these high stakes testing, so teachers were able to teach the student, and I think that that falls in line with, I believe, the first leg of the strategic plan that the school board has laid out and the superintendent has laid out in a whole child development. And whole child development would also, obviously those are important, obviously you want to try to succeed, but I think you can sort of pigeonhole that, and you need to color outside the lines a little bit in order to create an environment where you can develop the whole child and not just focus on the high stakes testing. And I think that's a major complaint from teachers that you hear, is that they're teaching to the tests and not to the students.
Thank you. Trustee Call?
Hello. If appointed as trustee and you were faced with a situation where you were forced to make a choice between one option that was the right thing for the kids and the other option was the right thing for our employees, which would you choose and why?
I think it would be the students. Honestly, it's difficult for me to imagine a scenario where those two positions are at odds with one another, given the long conversations I've had with teachers with what they face, with what the issues are in the school. Largely, you'll find that teachers are on the same side as a student. So like I said, I think that it's difficult for me to imagine a specific scenario. But we're all here for the children, right? That's why the school board's here, for the children of the community. That's why the schools are there. That's why the teachers there are for the children. And I think if you lose sight of that, then you can become a saboteur of what you're doing. You can be at odds with the community and children in the community. It's a balancing act, of course. I mean, it would depend on the specific scenario, what would be best. And I'm not going to say that that's 100% of the time. It would depend on the issue, but as a blanket statement generally speaking, I would have to say that we are all here for the children. And I see it just like I do with the work I do every day as an advocate for children. I'm an advocate for them, all right? I'm not an advocate for the judges. I'm not an advocate for my bosses or anything else. I'm an advocate for the children, and they're number one. Close number two would be the teachers and the staff of the school district. But it's important not to lose sight of why we're all here, because as I said before, I think the main goal is to keep sight of the children and to make sure that we're creating good, positive citizens that are contributing to El Paso in the future.
Thank you. Trustee Beals?
Hi. What do you see as the role of technology in education?
It's important. I'm a bit of a Luddite, right? Especially when compared to other lawyers that I know, where I prefer a pen and paper to a computer in class. But I think sometimes there's a focus on technology, and technology is not a cure-all. And technology can be a tool, but sometimes it becomes an end in itself, right? If you have a new technology that isn't actually reaching out to children, helping them become better students, then you may think about scrapping it. I think there's a real danger too sometimes in sort of this idea of like rent seeking and contracting with people and with these technology groups. and being sort of beholden to them and special interests, when again, I think the number one goal of a trustee, the number one goal of teachers, number one goal of schools is to actually teach. And if the technology is doing well and accomplishing that, then good. Another problem is, you know, as I pointed out before, with the five strategic levers, I believe equity is a problem, and sometimes children don't have access to this technology. Maybe they only have the access to the technology in the school, but when they're out of school, if you're relying too much on it, they may not have internet access. They may not be able to have their own computer at home if that's necessary. So there's a real danger. So again, there's a balancing act with that. It's important if it is useful, but it needs to be a tool and not an end in of itself in utilizing technology.
Thank you. Trustee Hernandez?
When appointed, what will you do to cultivate an effective team of 8?
An effective team
Of 8.
of 8. I believe I have experience doing that, not only running my own firm with a partner and other people and having to coordinate, but right now I am a supervisor at the Public Defender's Office, which again, not as big an organization as the school district by any means, but it is a large enough organization with about 100 or so employees, about 50 lawyers, and we have meetings every week where I can tell you that if you get, 7 lawyers in a room, there's going to be 7 different opinions. And the important thing is to voice your opinion, to stand strong by your convictions, by your opinions, and voice those strongly, especially if you do feel strongly about something, but it not to get to the point where there's antagonism. It's not to get to the point where it's personal. I believe I do that every day, even with opposing counsel, where you can maintain friendly, professional relationships with them, even though you're on opposite sides of the table. And then I know from experience that once, even though you do disagree, sometimes vehemently so, passionately so, but that once the decision has been made, and I have had experience where a decision has been made that I was very outspoken and opinionated against, but once that decision has been made by my boss, by my superiors, then it's my job to carry that out. It's my job to make sure that whatever decision is made, that we carry that out and be successful. Like I said, otherwise we're a saboteur. And you put your opinions aside and you have to go along with that. And I think, and also on top of that is, you try to communicate that to other people, to other members of the team, in order that you do have a common thread, a common theme that's running through it. It's difficult to do in that organization. I imagine it's even more difficult to do here with the 76 campuses that there are in EPISD, trying to get them along the same size, along the same side, and to run. But I think at this point,
Thank you, sir.
yeah.
Trustee Cuellar?
Mr. Vargas, good evening.
Hello.
Let's see, what do you consider to be your area of greatest growth as a board member? And how will you plan to grow as a person, board member, and team member?
I think the area of growth that I would need is to really get into the weeds as far as the issues. I mean, right now I followed some issues with the school district as close as you can, but until you're in there, then you don't know the minutia and what you're dealing with. And I have had experience doing that. For instance, I was already a supervisor in my office, and one day they came in and said, "You're now in charge of the juvenile unit." And I'd been practicing at that point for about 15 years, and I had no idea what juvenile law was about, how it was defending children rather than adults. But once I was tasked with that, then I made it a point to learn as much as I could. And I would venture to say that at this point, I am one of the leading lawyers when it comes to juvenile law in the city of El Paso, merely because when tasked with that, I couldn't help but be dedicated to something that I was tasked with. I couldn't help but be passionate with what I was tasked with, especially because it was children. And I meet children every day that fall through the cracks, and my job is to be passionate, be a zealous advocate for them. So my role as a trustee would be to get in, know the rules. I'm the kind of guy that when you play a board game, I'm the only one who reads the directions, all right, ahead of time. And maybe that's a little bit annoying, but I think it's important to do that. You need to read the rules and know what you're working with, and then work from there, because you can be limited by the rules. And if you don't know that, then whatever grand idea you may have, whatever grand strategy you have, is going to be hamstrung if you don't know what the actual parameters are, what the restrictions are on wanting to carry a certain plan forward. But I plan on growing as a trustee, just like I did in that role, just like I have in the role of the chief of the mental health unit, is really getting into the weeds and trying to learn as much as I can in order to advocate for the people that I've been tasked to advocate for.
Thank you, sir. The final question is, in your opinion, what role do trustees play in the day-to-day operations of a school district?
In the day-to-day operations, I mean, it's difficult to say, right? It's not, I think you're looking at things from a 40,000-foot view, mostly as a board member. That being said, I think it would be important to, outside the scope of meetings and documents and data, to be able to talk to people, to be able to talk to teachers, to be able to talk to members of the community, to be able to visit schools that are in your district in order to see what the day-to-day challenges are, what's good about the schools, about the district. I think oftentimes, obviously with an organization like EPISD that's been under such scrutiny for the past several decades, that it's easy to focus on the negative. It's easy to focus on what's wrong. And it's important to do that, obviously, in order to fix that. But another thing is to go into the community and see what is good day to day and what is working. And I think if you only look at it from 40,000-foot view, then you're really only getting these numbers and problems. And I think you lose sight of what is positive and what is working, and do more of that and try to focus on less of what isn't working. But that takes some real elbow grease, that takes some real, boots on the ground, some mentality, and going out there and not just reading what you're supposed to read and coming to these meetings prepared. But I think it gives you, some of it's anecdotal, but I believe it's important to know what teachers are doing every day, what the janitor's doing every day, how the schools run, and that'll give you a broad understanding to inform. It's not going to be the leading guiding light to guide you, but it is going to inform your decision making. It is going to inform how you read the data, how you interpret the data and all the documents and all the things you're reading, and the things that you're getting from members of administration, when you know what's actually going down at the root, at the ground, at the grassroots level, at the floor level. Then, like I said, that'll inform any decision you have to make.
Thank you. This time, if you would like to, with Ms. Carrasco to the back, that was the final question. Ms. Carrasco, we're going to see if the board needs to deliberate or make any statements, and then from there, we'll ask the candidates to come back out for the vote.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Did you make a sourdough cake?
When do we deliver?
Shall I wait for Ms. Carrasco to get back? Or, all right. So trustees, I don't know if there's anything as far as deliberation or statements that need to be made. I know Trustee Call would like to add a statement as he votes. I believe it's to the caliber of candidates that we received. Is that correct, sir?
Ms. Collins, I just have a quick statement I want to say about the process. Is it okay if I say it right before I vote, or do I need to say it now? Because I'd like to do it when the candidates are present, if possible.
You could do it when you vote.
All right, great.
Yes, Trustee Hernandez? This is the time? Yeah, there's deliberation needs to occur. Otherwise, we'll go ahead and call the candidates out and vote by a record vote.
I just wanted to say, I think all of them are very well qualified for us, but what I'm concerned so much for is, and I'm gonna be frank, how well this person was gonna be able to mesh with our group already. We know we only have a year for this person to decide whether they'd wanna run again. We, as a board, I believe, would need to work very hard, as well as the candidate themselves, to get them up to speed. And are we willing to help them get up to speed so they would want to continue with our board? Because the fact that we're going to spend a lot of time in this, it's because we spend a lot of time in the same arena. How are we going to get them to the point where we know that this would be a good fit for us? And that's my main concern.
Sorry, sorry, Ms. Carrasco, I think that's the deliberation, if you want to bring the candidates back out.
Yeah, you could say thank you, but I wouldn't address them individually. As a group, thank you for applying, or whatever you want to say, of course.
Hey, Israel? Sorry.
You're good.
Sure. I know that in speaking with trustee Hernandez, I think one of her concerns and, was just ensuring that whatever candidate is chosen, right, has plans to continue to seek election in 2025, right? So that there's continuity there? Is that what you were, okay. I mean, I'm assuming that all the candidates, all three of the candidates would plan to run in 2025. But again, that's something that is ultimately up to them, right? I mean, they can't be forced to run. We would like to have that continuity. But again, it's going to be a quick learn, I think, for any three of these candidates. But as Trustee Hernandez had stated right now, I think they're all highly qualified candidates within their respective background. I think it's going to be a difficult decision for the board to make. But I just wanted to thank, I think, the ad hoc committee, Ms. Collins, I think everybody that was a part of the decision-making process to get to this point, because it was a vote as to whether or not this was going to be an election and or a appointment process. I think the appointment process is much quicker, right, much more efficient and effective. But at that point, or at this point, we can just leave it up to our respective vote.
So, Trustee Hanani, we're going to start with you. As I know, Trustee Call's going to share some words. If you want to share some words before you vote, you're more than welcome to as well, for all trustees.
Yeah, I do just want to, first of all, thank the three candidates for applying for this position. I know there's certainly, it's a huge commitment to make to kind of take this on and sort of unexpectedly. And so I certainly understand how passionate you are about public education. I think that has really come through in all of your answers through the forum. It was a pleasure to see you all speak during the forum. So thank you. Thank you for applying to be a part of this process. Thanks to Ms. Collins and to the rest of the ad hoc committee. I too felt that it was a very efficient and effective process, and I'm glad that there was a lot of participation at the forum. I thought the students from Austin High School did a really good job facilitating that discussion, so it was great to see everybody in the community sort of come together to try and find somebody who could take on this role, and so just a great deal of appreciation to everybody involved. With that being said, is there a script?
So it'd be you just say the name of the candidate you prefer. No motion.
No motion,
Yeah,
okay,
no
so
motion.
just
We're going to do a record vote.
So the name of the candidate that I will be voting for, is that the right? The name of the candidate that I will be voting for is Jack Leverage.
That is Trustee Hanani's vote for Mr. Loveridge. Trustee Call?
Yeah, I made up my mind, but before I voted, I just wanted to say that probably most people know this, but some don't, that 6 years ago, I was sitting in those chairs. There was an appointment process in my district, and I put in for it. And it didn't go my way. It was unanimous the other way, and it was tough. It was tough. The ironic thing is that it's tough both ways. It's tough if you get selected because that's a whole nother set of challenges, and it's tough if you don't get selected because it hurts. And my son was 8 at the time, and he actually ran out of this room. Well, it was a different room back then, but he was in tears because he was very protective of his dad, and his feelings were hurt. And that was tough. That was tough. Turned out to be a blessing in disguise, of course, but either way, it's difficult. I'm really pleased that three, candidates of such caliber and accomplishments put in for this position. That's really gratifying to see. I sometimes had my doubts in this process whether we would get a good crop of candidates, and we certainly did. So whomever the majority of trustees choose at this point, what it means on a basic level is is that it's what we feel like is the right decision for the district right now. Sometimes the public sees it differently. And I want to emphasize right now too, because the fact of the matter is that all three of you as candidates have something to offer this district. And I hope that you do so, whether it's in a capacity as a trustee or another capacity. Ultimately, there's contributions that everybody needs to make to the well-being of the kids. So that being said, my vote is for Dr. Loveridge.
That is trustee call for Mr. Loveridge. Trustee Beals?
Hi, I'm trustee Bills. I'm one of the newer trustees up here, and I'm almost up, I've almost a year, I'm going on a year. I feel like there's still so much to learn, but I have learned so much in the short year that I've been here. There are a lot of things that I loved, that I heard. I have 4 kids in this district, and I'm very passionate about their education and their safety, and thank you for running, and thank you for willing to, put in the time for our kids and to better our district. My vote will be for Dr. Loveridge. Thank you.
And that will be trustee Beals for Mr. Loveridge, and this will bring us to Ms. Hernandez.
I'm still deciding, but I just wanted to share that it's a hard decision. It really is, because I see some great qualities where each and every one of you would be able to provide to us. I looked at the video from Austin High School, and as Trustee Bells had mentioned, it's going to take effort, yes, because of the fact that within a year, you would want to decide of whether you would want to run again. We're all in that, or some of us are in that same boat. We're in discernment, how we're going to do this. I just want to reach out and let you know, whoever's chosen, we're going to work as well as we can to get you up to par for us. As Ms. Bales had mentioned, it takes effort, even if you're in the education field already. And if you're not, like I wasn't, I'm just showing my modesty in knowing that there's still a lot to learn, even on my part, for me to decide. And I just need a moment of reflection on that. Please,
Yeah,
thank you.
we can jump to, if you don't mind, trustee Koya, we're going to jump to you then.
Again, I just want to echo what everybody else said. I know it probably sounds like a broken record, but when you have people willing to, sacrifice their time, effort, time away from family to make those very difficult decisions. We have 3 people with doctorates, right? I'm a lawyer. Mr. Vargas is a lawyer. We don't call each other doctor, right? That's always nice. But the fact that we have, 3 people, 2 PhDs and a JD, I think shows something amazing to the community and saying, hey, these are people that not only are well-versed in their respective backgrounds, but they're also willing to give that much extra more effort to their community. It was a difficult decision for me. I just want to make sure that that's known. But I went to the forum. I listened to all 3 of you all. I was sitting kind of in the back left side. A lot of the same things that were echoed there were stated here too. I think just the This was, I don't know if this was more nerve-wracking or less, but it was amazing to truly see, you know, 3 humble individuals come forth and say, hey, this is what I can provide and this is what I want to do well for my district. With that being said, my vote is also for Dr. Leverage. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Cuellar. Trustee Hernandez, do you need a couple more seconds and, or
Do you want to go first?
your call?
Isabel or Trustee Hernandez goes for Jack Leverage as well.
And I forgot to do it, Ms. Collins, Trustee Cuellar voted for Mr. Loveridge, and Trustee Hernandez voted for Ms. Loveridge. And I'm just going to echo what the board said. I think in many cases, when we look at what EPIC's story is, it has really set us at a disadvantage because that distrust is always going to exist. And what we found on this board, I mean, we've gone through Trustee Avalos and Trustee, or Dr. Acevedo's resignations. I think the one thing that we all agree on is this board's always here for the community and always here for the district. Whether it's the good, the bad, or the ugly, we're all here to support it. I think we found the superintendent to lead us into the next 20, 30, 40 years, who knows? And I think that that's what, you know, we're excited about. And so I really agree with every trustee that this was a really tough decision just because of the qualifications that came behind each of the candidates and the passion that we saw, as you see oftentimes up here. So thank you to each and every one. The value of being the board president, you get to vote last, which the spoil's out there, right? So my vote, Trustee Urbali is going to be voting for Dr. Loveridge as well. And with that, that's going to be a 6-0 vote for Mr. Loveridge. Congratulations, sir. We do appreciate each of the candidates' time. I do hope you continue to look at ways that you can support and help and serve this district. We definitely need it, but I just appreciate it, and congratulations. And with that, I will adjourn the meeting at 6:21. Thank you.